Today, we will dive together into one of the most audacious military operations ever carried out by China, a naval exercise that is putting the entire world on alert. Between late May and mid-June 2025, the Chinese Navy carried out an unprecedented maneuver, an operation that not only demonstrated the country's enormous naval ambition, but also the impressive level of maturity that its armed forces have been achieving. But what makes this operation so different from anything we've seen so far? For the first time in its history, China has placed its two largest operational aircraft carriers on opposite sides of the same military exercise, simulating a real confrontation on the high seas. Something that, until then, had only been seen in the naval combat doctrines of Western countries. And don't think this happened near the Chinese coast. Far from it. These maneuvers were conducted in the heart of the Western Pacific, far beyond the so-called First Island chain, a strategic line involving Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines. This move was much more than a simple military exercise. By crossing this symbolic threshold, China sent a clear and direct message. She is ready to project her naval power far beyond her coastal waters. With this, Beijing directly challenges the maritime supremacy of the United States and its allies in the Indo-Pacific region. But to understand the importance of this operation, we need to know more about the central pieces of this naval board. On one side, the legendary aircraft carrier Liaoning. This vessel has a curious history. Originally, it was a Soviet ship, unfinished and abandoned by Ukraine after the end of the Soviet Union. Bought by China in the early 2000s under the pretext of becoming a floating casino, it was completely refurbished and modernized. Officially incorporated into the Chinese Navy in 2012, the Liaoning is the country's first aircraft carrier. It has a displacement of around 60,000 tons, conventional propulsion, and a ski jump-style takeoff ramp, similar to the Russian aircraft carrier Kuznetsov. Its air operations are conducted by fighter jets J-15, a Chinese version heavily inspired by the Russian Sukhoi Su-33. During this exercise, Liaoning impressed. There were about 550 takeoff and landing operations between May 25th and June 16th, with peaks of 90 daily operations on at least 2 occasions. A remarkable feat, especially for an aircraft carrier that does not have catapults to launch its aircraft. These maneuvers took place more than 516 km of strategic points directly linked to Japan's sea routes. But Liaoning was not alone. Its battle group included powerful escort ships such as the modern destroyer Tangshan of the Type 052D class, considered one of the most advanced in the Chinese fleet. With a displacement of 7,500 tons and a maximum speed of 30 knots, the Tangshan is equipped with 130mm guns, 64 vertical missile launchers, and state-of-the-art sensors. Another member of the group was the Cruiserin of the Type 055 class, a true giant with 12,000 tons, 112 missile launchers, and formidable anti-aircraft artillery. Looking at this ensemble, it becomes clear that the Liaoning is no longer just an experimental or training aircraft carrier. She now acts as a true power projection core for the Chinese Navy. However, on the other side of this simulation was the even more advanced Shandong aircraft carrier. The first aircraft carrier built entirely in China, the Shandong represents a direct evolution of the Liaoning. While it retains the basic design with a ski jump ramp, it brings several improvements. Its deck is wider, its engines are more efficient, and its internal hangars are significantly larger, which allows for an even greater number of air operations. During the exercise, Shandong carried out approximately 230 takeoffs and landings, with its operations located very close to the Japan's exclusive economic zone. Furthermore, the Shandong battle group was even more robust. Included the destroyer Long, also of the Type 052D class, the cruiser Yongnan of the Type 055 class, and the frigate Yunsheng of the Type 054A class, with 32 vertical missile launchers and multiple point defense systems designed to face air and submarine threats. But there was an extremely important additional element. The group also had the logistics support vessel Shanghanhu of the Type 901 class. With a displacement of 45,000 tons and a speed of almost 30 knots, the Shanghanhu is essential to allow Chinese battle groups to operate at great distances, refueling not only the ships but also providing fuel for the aircraft carriers themselves, which are not nuclear-powered. This type of vessel clearly shows the Chinese intention to operate on the so-called concept of blue waters. That is, in the open sea, far from the national coast. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. What was behind this operation was not just a simple exercise. For the first time, China has openly admitted that the two aircraft carrier groups acted as opposing forces, in a clear rehearsal for real war scenarios. And what exactly was simulated in this unprecedented confrontation? As we mentioned at the end of the previous block, the most impressive aspect of this operation was not the number of takeoffs or the robustness of the ships, but rather the type of exercise that China decided to carry out. For the first time, the world saw the Chinese Navy simulate a realistic clash between its two largest battle groups. Yes, Liaoning and Shandong were placed on opposite sides, acting as enemies. The goal? To train for a possible real large-scale conflict in the ocean. And the simulations were not simple. According to Chinese state media itself, which rarely releases such sensitive details, the exercises included operations over cognition, air defense intense with interception of simulated threats, coordinated counterattacks between aircraft and ships, maritime assaults such as simulated approaches and attacks on enemy vessels, and, most importantly, complex tactical air operations involving multiple fighters and adverse conditions. Images released by the Chinese Navy showed fighter jets J-15 performing takeoffs and landings during the day and night, including under severe weather conditions. This detail is particularly relevant. Remember, these aircraft carriers, they do not have catapults, which makes operations much riskier, especially during storms or low visibility. Even so, China managed to maintain the cadence of operations for days on end, demonstrating not only technical capability, but also unprecedented operational maturity. Images of J-15 planes landing in the rain, zooming in on the pilots. This type of exercise is not just a test of equipment. It requires precise coordination between aircraft, warships, and command centers. Supply on the move, something only the most advanced navies can execute efficiently. Mastery of secure and resilient communications. Absolute readiness to face multiple simultaneous threats. And, as expected, this gigantic exercise did not go unnoticed by the neighbors. Throughout the operation, ships and aircraft of Japan closely monitored every Chinese move. Among the assets sent were destroyers from the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force, such as JS Raguru, JS Murazami, JS Ikazuchi. Additionally, patrol aircraft P-3C Orion were also mobilized for reconnaissance missions. The tension level was so high that at times, armed Chinese fighter jets were sent to intercept these Japanese aircraft. According to official reports, there were several attempts by foreign planes and ships to approach the area, although Chinese statements, as usual, did not explicitly mention the United States. However, experts point out that it is highly likely that U.S. ships and satellites also closely monitored the maneuvers. China knows everyone is watching, and precisely for this reason, this exercise goes far beyond training. In fact, it is a large-scale operational experiment. The real focus is on understanding how Chinese carrier groups could engage enemy forces in the future, particularly U.S. carrier battle groups. It is important to remember, today, no Chinese aircraft carrier comes close to the power of the U.S. nuclear supercarriers. But China is clearly thinking ahead. The lessons learned in this exercise will be applied to new Chinese aircraft carrier projects, which are already under development. Sources close to the Chinese Defense Ministry say the country has already started construction of its first nuclear aircraft carrier. This new ship, which is expected to operate electromagnetic catapults and nuclear propulsion, promises to place China on a new level of naval capability. And there's more. By acting beyond the Call-Second Island chain, which includes Guam, the Mariana Islands and parts of the Central Pacific, China has demonstrated that it is willing to extend its naval influence ever further. It's not just about showing military power. It is a clear strategic message. China will not accept geographical limitations. And with the vessels it continues to build and the exercises it carries out with increasing frequency, Beijing makes it clear that sooner or later, a direct confrontation with the United States for hegemony in the Pacific may become inevitable. Now that we understand what happened in the operation and how it was conducted, we need to look beyond the maneuvers and the cold numbers. The central question is, why did China decide to carry out this exercise now? To answer, we need to understand the Chinese strategic mindset. In recent decades, Beijing has methodically advanced in developing its naval capabilities. First, he focused on coastal defense, focusing on protecting its trade routes and its exclusive economic zone. Then it expanded to the Call-First Island chain, encompassing the South China Sea, Taiwan, the Philippines, and Japan. But now, China has made clear that its ambition goes much further. This exercise signals a new era, the era of the Blue Water Navy. In other words, a navy capable of operating anywhere in the world, with offensive capabilities, logistical support, and large-scale power projection. Images of maps highlighting Chinese naval expansion in concentric circles. The timing of the operation was not chosen at random. It took place in an international scenario marked by rising tension between China and Taiwan, increased US and Japanese military maneuvers in the region, expansion of defense agreements between the United States, Philippines, and Australia, and an increasingly unstable global environment with conflicts in Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Beijing wanted to send a clear message: we are prepared for a major conflict at sea. But the message was not just aimed at external rivals. She also targeted the internal public. By widely releasing images of J-15 fighter jets operating in challenging conditions, China seeks to strengthen nationalism, show the population that the Navy is ready to defend the country's interests, and consolidate trust in the armed forces as a pillar of stability. This aspect is vital for the Chinese Communist Party, which sees military victories and naval prestige as an essential tool for maintaining political control. Another central point is the factor technological and doctrinal. Although China's current aircraft carriers still lag far behind America's nuclear-powered supercarriers, China has demonstrated that it has mastered the most difficult element of modern naval warfare: the integration between naval and air forces on the high seas. This type of operation requires advanced logistics control, precise coordination between different classes of ships, ability to maintain constant air operations for days without pause, even under hostile surveillance. And it is precisely this dominance that could change the balance of power in the coming years. Military sources say the main objective of this exercise was to test the capabilities off command and control in a realistic combat scenario. That is, evaluate how crews react under pressure, the efficiency of communication systems protected against electronic warfare, the ability to detect and react to multiple threats, including enemy submarines and missiles. Furthermore, the Chinese were aware of another crucial factor: the reaction time of the United States and its allies. By carrying out these maneuvers far from the coast, China carefully watched how Japan, South Korea, and US forces would respond, both militarily and diplomatically. This type of experiment is strategic. It's not just about training. It is, in practice, a great psychological and diplomatic warfare test. By having its aircraft carriers act as simulated enemies, China not only trains how to attack, but also rehearses how to disorient rivals who follow the movement from a distance. The message is clear: if not even our internal enemies can defeat us in training, how do you intend to face us in real combat? Finally, there is still the element industrial. Each exercise like this serves to identify equipment failures, improve control software and sensors, improve long-term maintenance and logistics. In other words, even though the current Chinese aircraft carriers have clear limitations compared to the North American ones, China uses these maneuvers as floating laboratories. Every lesson learned from these missions feeds into the development of future aircraft carriers the country is already building. Information that few are noticing, but that could define the future of relations between China, the United States, and the rest of the world.